Welcome back to the Opportunity Playbook podcast. Today, my guest is Maria Ballesteros-Sola. She is a professor at the Channel Islands University. Maria, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So we had a conversation in 2020. Just for some context for the viewers, I was speaking at your class. It started out, if I go back even a little bit further, I was recruiting to replace one of my team members with the business I was working with. And so I came to your business club, met your students because we were looking for somebody possibly like a recent graduate who had studied in your HR program. And since it was a local business, you're right next door, that's where I went. And we ended up developing a rapport. And so I came back to speak at your classes. Hence, in March of 2020, I was speaking at your class, and after talking about careers and different strategies and recruiting and whatnot, we were walking out of the building, and you got a ping on your phone from the university that says, we're closing the school down. Now, we had already planned to have a revisit to help the students going into the job market for that graduating class in that June, but we, like many other people across the world, found ourselves adapting to how do we have conversations or coaching sessions or learning? What does learning look like in this environment? And we got thrown into being remote. So what I wanted to do in part is to continue the conversation, to look back at how education and the learning experience has evolved, especially when it comes to higher education, because you are in contact with different generations of people. So at that time, people who are coming out of high school, going into their first year, even people who are in the MBA program in your business school, and what it looked like then when we got thrown into this remote learning as the default versus what it looks like today, and maybe even some of the impact it's had on the learning experience.
When I look back at 2020 and I look, where we are now, I wish our only concern as a higher education, participant or player is a pandemic, right? The level of complexity of higher education these days make the pandemic days to look like, we were just warming up on our current situation. And I'm happy to unpack where I see those big trends and how they're impacting our students and our workforce.
I'm interested to know how it got more complex, because if I'm looking at the experience of the workforce, when I'm talking to job seekers, whether they're working or they're out of work and looking for the next job, I get one question continuously every time I interview somebody. Is this job remote? Can I work hybrid? And so my thought or my experience is working with job seekers is that it has not gotten more complex because the tools to work remotely or have a dispersed workforce or even manage them, there are so many of them where you can talk to people on any number of platforms, Microsoft, Slack, all those products allow you to have constant communication with people, probably even too much. How is education or the experience of education got more complex as a result going into more of remote learning?
Mm-hmm. So I like to use the word systemic shift to describe what we are, again, experiencing in higher education. I've been in Channel Island first as a part-time lecturer since 2007. And then when I get my PhD, I joined as a tenure track. So I've been, again, a witness and I guess an active participant in the last 18 years. And I come from a career in corporate America and corporate Europe. I getting a law degree, realizing I didn't want to be a lawyer, moving and work for a bank. I did online banking in the mid-90s in Spain. Then I got a job in London. And eventually, thanks to a Fulbright scholarship, got my MBA and got into management consulting. So my first half, I was on industry and on the corporate side. And then since 2007, more involved with higher education. And again, I think the 2020 pandemic and what came, moving or shifting very quick to the remote, was just the tip of the iceberg of what it was about coming. So now 5 years later, and I don't know, you follow the news, they're saying they're closing a university once a week, right? Which is, again, the pace of the crisis, if I can use that word, in higher education is accelerated. So let me bring some of those forces for the audience. The first one is obviously that there is a demographic cliff. There were fewer kids born in 2003, 2004. So the pool of kids that are considering a higher education degree is smaller to start with.
That's interesting.
Also, because of COVID, they removed obviously the admission test, SATs, which was obviously one of the biggest stress points for parents and kids in high school. Those are gone. Many universities are happy to see those, but they are not mandatory. So that's making kids that usually will not apply to some highly competitive universities because of SAT results. Now they say, why not? There is also a lot of questioning, and this is tied obviously with the workforce. What is the true value of a higher education degree, of a college degree these days? Especially in a context of higher tuition, right? And you have the perspective of parents that when you look, and there is a lot of research that asks parents, what are you value out of a college degree for your kids? And in many cases is that one, they graduate without debt, and second one, that they have a fulfilling career pathway. And I have to say, again, given the historical context that we are, that's not that easy. A college degree will not guarantee necessarily that job. And since we are almost in May, I can see the anxiety piling in our students that, again, are getting to the end of their college, first 4 years of college, and they haven't landed a job. I just came from lunch with some colleagues, and one was saying the son graduated last May, so we're talking almost like a year, upper school, Ivy League, and the kid is literally working in a supermarket down the road because he cannot find a job on what he graduated, right? And again, you will think that he has been given all the tools to be successful, and those jobs are not there. So I think now there is an emphasis in what we call post-graduation outcomes, and this idea of campus to career. So how do we really help students during those 4 years, not just to get a college degree, which of course is one of our objectives. We want our students to graduate, but be sure that developing the skills that will allow them to get the skills and the experience to land a job that they want. And then you have also AI, which of course we all know has been a very disruptive force, right? And we are starting to see the impact on entry level jobs. I don't think any level is immune to losing your job. You can think of a middle career software engineer. I don't think I would like to be one of those. So I think at all levels in industry, we're going to see, again, the impact of AI, but especially on entry levels. So we were trying to figure out also within the universities, what is the skill set? What is that baseline skill for all knowledge workers? And I don't know, we will talk about AI related skills, but I also have, my own ideas and what I'm trying to do as we speak in the classes. The last, I guess, contextual fact is that there are layoffs, right? That doesn't matter, like government jobs, private companies, a lot of people as we speak are losing their jobs. So how is that impacted the recent graduates? So again, it's almost like this perfect storm. And I would like to bring a positive message because at the end of the day, we're alive, we're healthy, we need to keep, pushing forward and delivering, but it's a big question mark about many of the factors that, we're going to be discussing.
Those are great points. And this is why I think it's so valuable to have conversations with people who touch different points of careers, professors included, students included from their experiences, because you talked about something that I wasn't even aware of, which was a lot of people are focusing on the narrative of what is the value of higher education right now, meaning talking about that post-college, that post-education,
Mm-hmm.
what are my career options? Are there any options? But you mentioned that there were less people born in the time frame, at least relative to now, at where we're seeing this. So there's not just one variable impacting higher education, prompting universities to close or prompting people to question what is the value of higher education. But you did talk about something else that everybody talks about, which is what happens when I don't have a job? Do I go back and get a degree? And you're saying that the people who are going to get a degree as a first step, they're coming into the job market and saying, I don't have any job opportunities. And even the anecdote you just got from today from your colleague having lunch, I hear that one all the time. I hear it from the people who are middle career, as you described, who have been laid off. They go back to Ivy League schools. I have this anecdote that I talk about pretty frequently. I met with somebody from Carnegie Mellon, and I've actually met several people there who have spent $280,000 on an MBA. And this is a direct quote. This one person said to me, naively, I thought that this education, this degree, and the university would get me the job. I would love for you to talk about your efforts, even if right now they're evolving to try and understand what is the best approach, but your efforts with the school or your community and your alumni, because you have different alumni groups, on this post-graduation effort that helps people secure opportunities at a time where the market is oversaturated with talent from layoffs across all business sectors, not just technology, where people are starting to question their careers or where they should even be, and where highly educated people can't find opportunity, and now they are. And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with working at a grocery store. I worked at a grocery store when I was going through college, but the disparity here is that, as you said, this person has done everything right. They've gone to some schools and university. They've invested in their education. They're a top performer as a student. And their only choice seems to be that they didn't need to go to a university to work at a grocery store. They could have just gone straight there and had a job with benefits. So I would be interested to know how the university is working with, or how your colleagues are ideating on how to support people post-graduation so they can align them with the next phase of their career post-graduation.
Yeah, and if I can just bring the conversation first, the before graduation, right? I mean, it's almost, if you ask me, I work mostly with undergrads. We also have obviously an MBA program, and I teach sporadically in the MBA, but most of my work is done with undergrad. So if you are asking about post-graduation, for me to do my job properly, it will be a little bit too late. So I guess for me, the reflection, and this is an ongoing conversation we're having now for many years, and especially in a field like business, right? But you will think of all the professions have the same challenges. How do I design learning experience through those 4 years that I have the students with me, to be sure that when they finish, they have developed those skills and they have a portfolio of evidence, and I calling them artifacts because of the experience they have had during 4 years, where they can actually demonstrate that they know how to do something. And this idea of portfolios, which obviously is borrowed for the arts, right? If you are a graphic designer, nobody questioned that you have a portfolio. Well, we are creating portfolios with our business students so they can demonstrate at the end of the 4 years that yes, they have built a website, that they have done a marketing strategy, that they have done, a landing page, a CRM, with HubSpot. So I think we have talked before about this student-run agency. This is one of the examples. In Channel Island, we have something called CI Solution, and the students are actually working with a small business and nonprofit that have needs, and they are delivering, and they are getting paid to do this job. So this is a curricular effort that got started with my fantastic colleague, Kim Pelivan, a professor of marketing, during the pandemic, because she realized our students were losing their jobs right and left. It's like, what learning and earning, so it's learning and earning opportunities I can create so the students, again, are making money while staying home. And that's how she got started with this program. It's a very successful program, 5 years old now. So again, the students not only are making money, but they are creating those artifacts, that tangible evidence of the skill set that they are developing. When I think of courses too, because obviously that's done outside our traditional curriculum, but we are bringing a lot of what we call high impact practice, so experiential learning, where the students, again, have an opportunity as part of an academic effort. It could be last semester I taught marketing strategy. So we work with local business. So the students wrote a marketing plan for those local business. Again, these are examples in which the students are not only creating the hard skills that a marketer might need in terms of the content, the principles, the tools, but they are also developing those soft skills. If you think about project management, time management, being on time, how you talk to a client, how you present in public. So that's why before I talk about post-graduation, I want to say is post-graduation for undergrad is too late. This effort needs to start actually as freshmen. And it's not uncommon that, and I don't blame freshmen. I mean, we all have been 18 years old,
Yeah.
but by the time they decided to get engaged with campus activities, it's almost too late, right? And it's not uncommon that either a senior tells me this, or even I just talked yesterday to an alumni. He's a successful entrepreneur right now. He wants to give back to the university, so he's going to be one of our speakers. But he was saying, "Oh man, I wish when I was, a sophomore, a junior, what I know now, because I went through 4 years in Channel Island. I just want to get a paper because that's what my parents wanted from me, right? To get a college degree as a paper." And then he was totally lost. And he was describing his pathway, but now, and it's always, in hindsight, and we're all smarter. Like, okay, now I'm 30, I'm running my own company, very successful, but I wish I had used the time on college better, right? In a more productive way. So that's for, again, undergrad. When I think of managers, especially, they found themselves, that they have lost their job and they are considering going back to school, I will invite them to be very critical and in terms of what is the skills that they want to develop, right? And I have to say, my more mature students are the ones that are coming back. When someone or their 20s, late 20s or early 30s, they go back to to school, even if it's undergrad or master, it's not the parents pushing them to get just a degree, and they want to learn. So we welcome them, and we have this similar mindset. They are with us, they already have the professional experience, but what is specifically the skill set that they want to, acquire, that is going to make coming back to school obviously worthy. And this is something I invite everyone to do. Our university, but other universities, we are constantly launching new products because we have to be very dynamic and respond to the workforce needs. We are just launching, for instance, master in data analytics, right? For people that don't necessarily have the technical expertise or the quantitative expertise, but everyone should be able to get data, analyze it, tell a story, and create some visuals.
One, I love that as a true marketer, it sounds like this person coined the learning and earning. What is the value proposition of this program? And I think the other aspects of it, secondly, is it sounds like you're focusing on the immediate need, which you presented as it's too late if we didn't start doing this first. But this is also a present need in general, which is I need a body of work. I need practice. I need the opportunities to be able to develop these skills practically and for business. And really, this leads to something that I am seeing in the job market. People are now reevaluating, what am I going to do with my career? How do I capture my value of my experience for those who have work experience? How do I capture the value of my experience for myself? And what I mean by that is I'm seeing a trend of people becoming fractional workers, consultants. Now, you obviously had that in your life, and it's not anything new, but I'm watching more and more people do this as a default. And there's a couple reasons. One, economically and related to the job market with all these layoffs, I think that they don't see another choice because they've been waiting around for, as you said, that person's been waiting around for a year to find a job, and they said, well, I need a job, so I'm going to go get a job at a grocery store, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. But those who have developed skill sets are now saying, well, how can I market my skill sets? Which is why it's so valuable to have these programs and really even a marketing perspective, not just having a program that has you creating marketing plans for small businesses, but this is where I see it going. And it sounds like the reason why you guys have these dynamic programs is because you also see a need, that there is a market for this more entrepreneurial approach to your career. Do you see that that is the direction of education and maybe even the workforce from your side?
I think for all of us, I'm trying to think age-wise, and what will be the equivalent in the US. But I come from two parents that work in the same company for 40 plus years, because that was the
Doesn't exist
expectation, right?
anymore.
Without a college degree, because I'm first generation myself. So
Yeah.
my parents, middle class in Spain, work for, again, two different companies all their career. And I think my generation is the one that transitioned into this more of your own pathway. But what I'm sensing versus what I did, because I was not afraid, I always say in my case, it was a little bit of serendipity. I mean, good work, also right connection, emotional intelligence, great mentors, and then a little bit of good luck, or a lot of good luck in terms of how I end up getting a scholarship that paid for my MBA, and how I have made connections that invite me to become director of, in a startup. But I never really, till the last 2 or 3 years, and especially now since I took over our entrepreneurship institute, is this idea of being our own companies. And we are all, and I don't care if you work for the government or you work for the nonprofit, but we are micro entrepreneurs, right? We are developing those entrepreneurial skill sets, because no matter if you work for yourself as a fractional, I met today for the first time a fractional CTO, right? I'm used to fractional CFOs, fractional CEOs, but a CTO, I was, like, it makes sense, right? It doesn't matter, what field we are talking. So even if you don't get to the stream to sell your own services, because you are still working inside a company, this idea of being entrepreneurial, I think is critical. And that requires like the ability to be self-learning and self-teaching yourself all the time. And of course, you can rely on higher education institutions, and there are a lot of certificates, micro-credentials, but of course, there are opportunities to keep learning without, eventually the degree. So again, this idea that we are our own companies, and I don't wanna sound like too, corporate or capitalist, because I believe on a stakeholder, theory, and how role of business and the private sector is obviously to attend the needs of different stakeholders. But we need to think of, again, what are the skill sets I have today, how they actually have value, and how I keep increasing them for the long run. Again, because look at AI and what AI is doing to the workforce, right?
Yeah.
And no one can prepare you for that. At least you take the initiative.
I think you've been doing this work for probably longer than you're describing. And what I mean by that is, I know
Yeah.
that when I came to speak at your class the first time, that we were having this conversation because I was talking to your students and I said, by the way, any job that you're looking to get after college, people are paying you for a skill set, one that you probably developed through projects. And then you introduce that idea of the portfolio, but also reframing it in the way that you just described too. But we live at a time, and even then we still lived at a time, that you can package, market, and sell your skill sets that someone would hire you for right out of college, even right out of high school. And I say this because I see teenagers joining programs that they find through social media, through agencies. You see lots of different agencies. Even you yourself said the college now has its own agency of sorts where they're working with small businesses. That's what these people are doing on social media. They are entrepreneurs. They're saying, hey, I have a skill set, or I learned it from somebody else here on social media. Now I'm going to repackage it and sell it for myself to others who need it, small businesses, individuals. And so it's happening in perpetuity. So I think anybody who would ignore what you just described as being our own solopreneurs, as I've heard it branded, would be blind to where business and employment, or just producing income and revenue for yourself, is going. I think that's where it's going. It sounds like that's what your programs are addressing, but that you already started years ago. One, because you need to get people into the practice of doing it, getting the repetitions to execute, serve businesses, have an outcome or a portfolio of work to say, I have the evidences that I can do this for you. But I think, to your point, I'm watching it go in the direction of people are doing this for themselves. I'm actually part of an AI instructional group that works with small businesses, and it's all a bunch of individuals who have had some sort of career. They're of different ages. Not all of them are, 40s or older, Gen X or anything like that. Some of them are. But what everyone is doing in there is saying, I need to learn the skill set because it's changing and evolving so fast, as you've commented on, but also because I want to produce the benefit for myself. I don't have the opportunity that your parents had to work at one company, or even my parents, to work in one company for 18 plus years. And even at the end of that, you know what happens? They go, you're getting kind of close to 40. Why don't we go ahead and lay you off?
Yep. Yep.
So
Both.
how do you create that value for yourself and even that job security by adding new skills as they evolve? And they're evolving very quickly. Is there any particular place that you're excited based on what you were teaching and having these more dynamic programs? Is there anything you're excited to introduce? I know you just introduced this data program. Are there any other exciting programs you're introducing?
In terms, again, of curricular programs, we are working in a few certificates and we're working with industry partners. One thing I want to make clear is that we cannot do this alone, right? And this is obvious, but if people in your audience could go back in time and see themselves when they were in their 20s, right? And how at the end is so critical to have access to that first internship or that first experiential project or have a mentor. So also as a professor, as an academic, I'm always putting a call out there for people that might feel that they can give back, to reconnect like the way you did, right, with us, which you've been an amazing partner in the last 5 years, is how can I help to help, to mentor, to nurture, to bring these ideas that when they are said by someone external, it's like with our little kids, right? Parents can say something 1,000 times, but then you have someone else that say it and it's like, wow. So that's what happened with the students when they hear the voice from the industry, they have mentors from outside, they have an opportunity to have an internship. Because even if I want them to develop this entrepreneurial mindset, no matter what they do, at the end of the day, I need industry partners, companies, business, organizations in the community that say, yes, Maria, we would love to welcome one of your students. And that's another, type of work that I'm doing within the institute to be sure that we develop pipelines of internship for the students to have that experience. The CI solution is an example of internship, but again, that's a small scale. It's a small 3 to 5 week project that the students complete remotely, versus the idea that they could walk into an actually office space and learn from professionals. So we are trying to actually combine both.
It's interesting when I talk to job seekers, and I've talked about this a lot, they are looking in their top 5, sometimes top 3 interests is the place they want to go, or even why they're leaving their current company. People of all ages, by the way, people of all levels of employment. Everyone has their own version of, I need mentorship. But I can tell you that most people that I speak to, they are all looking for some version of, I want someone to learn from, especially as they get higher and higher and higher in their career. How do you go to people in confidence? How do you get mentorship when you're at the top? Everybody has this challenge with respect to where they're at, but it's invaluable to have mentorship because, like your mentor, partner, alumni said, I wish I knew this when I was 18. And they're only 30 or something.
Yeah.
So everyone, and that person's successful, right? But what people don't understand, there's this great book that I came across a couple years ago. It's called From Strength to Strength. And it was written by a social anthropologist. I don't have his name in front of me, but it talks about this natural curve of people's careers, actually your career role models it almost perfectly. Which is, you started out as the mentee or the student, you were learning, you became the expert in your field, you've been through a couple of different careers of success, and then you got to this point where now you're teaching and guiding others. You're quite literally a professor and mentor. But what he found interesting and what inspired him to write this book was he was on a plane and he overheard a conversation between an older couple. And the guy was remorseful. He felt regret about his career, what he hadn't achieved. And he said when he was deplaning, he saw who it was. He doesn't give the name in his story, but he saw who it was and said, if you had seen this person, they have many accolades, many awards, but they were still looking back and going, man, I didn't accomplish enough. You could look at it a couple of ways. His preface is that you can never be continuously the top performer. At some point, you will go into the mentor stage and you'll find more fulfillment by teaching others, like your colleague or the alumni said, like, I wish I knew this. That's why I'm coming back here to mentor others. Same reason why I know you. But I think the other part of that is everybody at some level can still learn from someone else. And who do they go to? So I think programs like this, just to start, not only do you provide the education relative to what skill set or business they're looking for, but I think you also early on get them into the practice of seeking out mentorship and setting the expectation. While this might be a small program to you, I think the more and more organizations that can do this, you add a lot of value. And then mentorship, I would hope in the future, becomes more of a standard process. Because right now, this is almost every anecdote I've ever heard of mentorship, myself included. I was lucky enough to meet this person. I was lucky enough to get access to them. I was lucky enough to get their advice. I was lucky enough to then get this opportunity that followed it. But it's not, there are a few organizations that have structured mentorship available to them. So setting this as an expectation, having programs that do this, what I see this is you're actually creating more mentors for the future because they know the value of it. It's not something necessarily to look back and go, I'm successful. I'm one of the few. And now I would like to give back to somebody else. I think you're exponentially growing mentorship in the future through these smaller programs, which is really exciting to hear.
Yeah. And if I can just reflect on something that you said, because especially this month, as you know, is Women History Month. So I've been participating in a few events through the month where we are reflecting about leadership, female leadership and women leaders. And again, hearing and talking to a lot of women, I think it's important, since you talk about getting to the top, that we reflect of what success means, because I'm starting to push a little bit against this idea that you have to make it to the top to think of yourself as successful. And I'm not being naive. We have to pay the bills. So I'm not saying,
Sure.
that success can be just some intangibles, especially in Southern California. We all know the cost of living. I think that we have been ingrained, again, as a generation, Gen X, that success is defined by what is said on your title. And there is always this rat race, right? Of keep working, because hard work is what's going to get you to the next level, and eventually you arrive in your level of incompetency. And I want to put a call out there too for our younger generation to make your own definition again of success, and not be so obsessed about titles and the kind of the six figures that may come with those titles. And again, as long as you can pay your bills. But I'm advocating again for reflecting and helping our younger people to understand that we have to work hard, but we want to be successful human beings versus just successful professionals that might have a miserable life when we close the laptop, right? Because we have been so focused on developing that career that will bring us to the top. And I do talk a lot about our students about this. It's not incompatible with this thought of you always have to be learning. And every time I interact with a student, the student bring the challenge, the problem. I mean, the casuistic of what our students are dealing with is so complex. Things like mental health were never in the conversation 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and that's now the front, of all of newspapers and parents' concern, and of course, administrators, professors. So that almost, and again, I'm not a mental health professional, but you see yourself in that mentorship role, taking on conversations that I was never expecting. But that's why I'm always eager to say, don't feel constrained by this idea that you have to become, top on something. You are writing your own, definition of success.
You mentioned you went to college, got this piece of paper. That's just what we did. And then you reiterated it, talking about the levels of success that you get to and what is the value and how do you value yourself. It really starts to get in the conversation of mindset. You were talking about a rat race or job titles or the amount of money that you make. There's a lot of different ways you could look at it. One thing I think you would find interesting is when I talk to people who are further along in their career right now, and again, people are reevaluating what's important to them. I'm not even going to say career-wise, just what's important to me now. Obviously, the career or the job or paying the bills, the resources is important. That's always a variable for it, but everyone's reevaluating what is important to me right now. And what I noticed, because I'm of that generation in between, you just go to college, get the piece of paper. Now I have success. What's the next thing? I get the job and it pays me X amount of money, but I want to work towards 6 figures. Now I have success. The funny thing about success is that once you get to that level of success, you're always saying, what's next, right? And so it can feel unfulfilling once you get there. And then you look around and go, okay, now am I going to fill this hole with something else, some other level of success, some new job title? And when you are earlier in your career or you're still in your higher education and you haven't gotten there yet, you think that all the things are important, and it is important to set goals and achieve them. But I think it would probably surprise most of them that people now, their parents even, and anybody their senior, not necessarily older, but their senior, more experienced, they're having the same conversation with themselves. What's important? What does success look like for me? I think it's always valuable to provide that context, because the younger students go, I don't have the experience, I don't have the value, subtext. But generally, I don't have the experience. How am I going to compete? And the people who are older and have experience go, I have too much experience. How am I going to compete with the younger people who are just young and moldable, right? Everybody wishes that they're on the other side, but everybody's trying to evaluate for themselves what success looks like. And I think the important part about having a mentor is someone who can reframe these ideas for you of what success looks like, not just in terms of monetary. I heard this conversation. It was a podcast that Myron Golden did recently. And he was talking about a mentor that he had in this conversation. And his mentor, because of his level of success, is a billionaire. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part that he shared was when you can have a mentor who can see you where you're at and see that you have a certain amount of potential that you have yet to achieve, and then they can guide you there. I think when you can work with folks like that to show you the other aspects of success in the ways that it might mean for you are not limited to those other tangibles, money aside. And maybe that is the level of success you want to get to. It's, I need to make more money, want to make more money. There are other goals I have. Maybe I want to buy a house, which is very hard to do now.
Wow.
That being said, I think it's important to have mentors because a lot of people don't see their value. They don't have self-worth, especially since you're talking about mental health. I work with people all the time, people who on paper, on LinkedIn, look amazing. You would imagine these people have no problems whatsoever. They're doing just great. I would like to be them. I would love to be in their position. But if I were to introduce you to some of them, you would see that they're having the same struggles as everybody else. And so everyone has some version of what success looks like, what challenges look like, but I will tell you that they have more in common than they don't. And it's important to have a mentor to reframe those challenges for themselves so they can sit back and go, oh, I am successful. Let me look back and see where I've come. Wow, I came from, I'll use you as an example. I came from Spain. My parents had 1, maybe 2 jobs in their whole career, which by the way was standard. Now it's more like 5 careers, but in their day it was about 1 or 2. And now you have a Fulbright scholarship. Now you have been through the echelon of corporate America. Now you're a professor teaching others and you're building dynamic programs. But at every level of success, I'm sure you were looking around and going, what could I do now that's fulfilling? And how could I help others? How can I guide others to their success and help them define that for themselves? And maybe, as you said, it's not money. Maybe it's not a job title. And by the way, for anybody watching, job titles are going to get more and more arbitrary. I don't think it's going to be, even just looking at how people are going through interview processes, it is skills, it's evidence-based, which is what you're building for your students. That's what's going to be important. People don't care about the prestige of your job title. They could give a shit. They don't care. They don't care about your degree. They're a dime a dozen now. Everybody looks the same on paper. I know because I have to look at hundreds of resumes, but people hire people and they want to look for that grit, that perseverance, that belief in themselves more than they want to see your job title. Some people are a little archaic still. They want to see all those things. They want to see the 10-page resume. I had a conversation with my former boss at lunch today. Oh, they want to see this resume. It's got to have all these things. It's got to have every piece of information. Some people still care about that, but I will tell you point blank that the people who do, they're probably going to be retiring in the next 10 years. People these days, they want to see what result you can produce. And so the work where you're teaching skills that can evolve with the times, people want to know what you deliver. So that's why it's really important that you work with someone who can say, hey, look, these are skill sets you have. Do you know the value of them? Not even just your self-worth. Do you know the value of them? Now let's talk about who your clients are. And it really is taking more of a marketing approach to help people build value for themselves. But the interesting thing that happens when you do this is that when they no longer rely on other people to give them the value or the perspective that they have value, the job title, the prestige, the arbitrary salary, then they start to go, oh, I have the ability to impact people. I bring value and I capture it for myself. And it goes back to this trend of entrepreneurship that it sounds like you're building programs around. That's where I see this going, but that's why I love mentorship so much. And it sounds like this is the work that you're doing, which is future pacing what it means to be in the workforce, if you will.
And something I have learned about mentorship, just to encourage people out there, is that the mentor actually learns more from the mentee. So even if my students come to me thinking that they're going to be getting advice or learning from my experience, after every single conversation, I have make a reflection on my own career, but also learning from something they bring to the table. There is something to be said about this idea of 360 mentoring, right? We talk a lot about 360 reviews in HR, but I would love to start developing this 360 mentorship approach where the mentors are also getting a lot out of having this session, not only because they are giving back, but because it's an opportunity to reflect on their own achievements. I'm advocating for a purpose-driven career, and it's easy for me to say now what I am because I never had a plan. And as I go, you just described my career, but the way I tell my career, my students, is I made a lot of mistakes, right? Went to law school, never went to be a lawyer. Worked for a bank, but never wanted to be a banker, right? Moved to London just because I want to be on the city and have fun and discover my passion for, marketing. So it's a little bit of serendipity. Be well prepared, be willing to do the hard job, developing the emotional intelligence skill sets, and be also open to the universe. I use this idea when I talk to students of cosmic breadcrumbs, and you never know who you're going to talk, right? You are putting a breadcrumb somewhere that maybe 2-3 years down the line is like, oh, I met this gentleman called David Camacho in this presentation, and now I can reach out to him, and he knows someone that might need, again, someone with my skill set. And again, especially with first-gen students, they are afraid of that. They are afraid of what the universe can bring to them if they embrace it. So again, I'm pushing for that cosmic breadcrumb theory, and a little bit of purpose-driven career, and of course 360 mentoring, because the students are teaching us every day, and they're amazing to work with. And I feel fortunate because teaching is my second career, and I coming from a place like Spain where you are expected to do something for the rest of your life and you don't leave a secure job, this has been the most rewarding thing I ever thought I could do. But I'm also open to maybe I lose my job at the end of this semester, and then I will be reflecting of, what is my skill set and what can I bring to the table to, for future opportunities. So I'm not afraid anymore.
I think if you look at some of the threads that go through everything you just shared, one of them is you talked about the importance that I tell this to people all the time. I told my client this today. You need to be talking to more people more often for, as you described it, your cosmic breadcrumbs connecting you through relationships, because you don't know which relationship is going to lead you to an opportunity. There are very specific ways I could tell you how this works when it comes to your job or job opportunities or just making money. If you were to look at it from a hiring standpoint, talk to as many recruiters as you possibly can. I have my own particular opinions about them. They don't always have something available for you. But if you're just talking about the transaction of what it means, talk to somebody, let them know who you are, what you do, what you need, what's the outcome you're looking for, who you work with, who you serve. Put it out there. My stepdad said something to me a long time ago. I talk about this all the time. He said, so you want to change your career at some pivotal point. Great. Be prepared to go out there and talk to as many people as possible. Do it all day, every day, And my mom described it as, how do people know that you need help or you need something if you don't let them know? Or you might have heard this phrase, closed mouths don't get fed. So it's very, very important, message out there to anybody. I don't care if you're just coming into college or your second or third degree, or you're in the workforce currently reevaluating your career, your current job, or unemployed. You need to be talking to more people more often because you have no idea which relationship is going to lead to your next opportunity. Those breadcrumbs, as you said. And then the other one is the learning from others. As you know, as a teacher, that anytime that you can teach people, you are also teaching yourself. They are teaching you something through the conversation, which makes it invaluable.
Always.
I found myself in an interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago. I was in a mentorship call, right? Everybody has their own level of mentorship. There's actually a community. And a lot of these people, some of them are younger than me. They're probably the age of your students. There's even high school students in this mentor group.
Oh, wow.
And that's how important mentorship is. I think the awareness of it has grown, which is fantastic. But you don't have to go to college to get mentorship groups. There's lots of them. But there was a venture capitalist on this particular call, and somebody said something interesting to him. They were talking about struggle. And he said, do you think that these other highly wealthy people, these millionaires and billionaires, do you think that they don't struggle? And I described it like this. Everybody has some version of the struggle bus. Some buses just cost people more to maintain. Or as one person I heard say this, she said, I also take risks. My risks just have more zeros behind them. And you're always learning, whether you're the mentor or teaching. Even this mentor said, look, I need to get 30 at-bats. I have to try to get 30 at-bats a day for me to be successful. I'm not just not successful because now I'm rich. Everybody has this different level of success they're trying to achieve. And as this person is mentoring, they're learning, but they're also showcasing how they're learning, and that you can still learn even when you're successful. As you said, your alumni is like, well, I'm still learning, so now let me give back. And the other thing, if I pointed this out in a conversation I had with a colleague that I went to college with in one of my first episodes of this podcast, and we were talking about, by having all these conversations, where you're learning too is now you as the educator, the mentor, now you're gathering data points. And this works regardless of your position, whether you're the person leading and teaching or the one that people are coming to for knowledge and they expect you to have the answers. But the more conversations you have with people, the more that you learn about what's going on around you related to the conversation or the goal someone's working on. So that education just through conversation with people, it does continue to make you the subject matter expert, because now you have awareness. And from awareness, you can make decisions and you can leverage relationships, or you can point people to new relationships. But I think being a mentor is invaluable. That's why I do this podcast in general, because a lot of people, as I mentioned, don't have access to that. There's lots of people who would love to know that there's a professor like you or a program like that, and that this is really, I think, the future of education. I think it also might get smaller. I'd be curious to know what you think about that. I think it's going in the direction of what you were talking about earlier, which are these like micro certifications, these more condensed learning experiences. And not because the longer term educational process isn't valuable, but things move so fast, specifically with technology, specifically with AI, that I think it's really more of what's naturally going to happen. Something else could happen too, but this is what I see happening.
It does. And again, we cannot predict the future. No, I hope to be invited, no matter in the world I am, in 5 years, and say, Maria, remember when we have our second podcast in 2025, right? And the things that we were predicting. But I do believe there will always be a space for higher education. There is something to be said on the understanding of how pedagogy and andragogy works, teaching obviously to younger people versus teaching to adults. There is a whole science behind on how we learn. And even if AI is challenging that, I think I'm a bit advocate for AI in the classroom. I use it on my day-to-day activities. But again, it is a little bit like the Wild West out there, right?
Oh,
so
absolutely.
If I were an 18-year-old or even a 25-year-old thinking of, what to do next, how do I go about developing that skill set, I do think that higher education are well positioned if we are able to also be dynamics and not behave like elephants, to be, giving that workforce, either because they are trying to upskill themselves or because they are coming out of high school, to give them the skill set to have those purpose-driven careers, as solo entrepreneurs, either working in any of the three sectors: government, nonprofit, of course, the private sector. So I'm moderately optimistic because, especially, the CSU, I don't know if you read it, we've been going to be offered. When I say the whole CSU, that means professors, staff, and of course, alumni. Now we have free access to ChatGPT, the 4.5, and there is a lot of conversations and a lot of support for us to incorporate that in our classroom and, of course, on our day-to-day operations. So I do think, with the CSU, we're at the frontier of figuring out how AI is transforming what we do. And I like to always finish when I talk about AI with three key core skills: how to do proper prompt engineering, how to develop the critical thinking. So as a student or as a worker, what's coming out is actually right. And of course, the third one is ethical considerations, of what is the ethical analysis that we have to do when we work with AI. But that's happening as we speak. And that's what I'm optimistic that universities still have a role to play in educating the workforce of the future, the present and the future.
It is a tool. And even though it is infinitely more sophisticated than just email, there are things that have occurred technologically over the past several decades where people were like, oh, I don't use email. I don't use electric documents, PDF. I don't have a database. Everything's on paper. There's actually still people today. I have a colleague who was telling me about them working with a business, and they had to implement all of the software because they were still running off of paper. I know businesses here in town that still run off of paper, but if you saw them in town, you'd be like, oh no, that business is everything together. Their branding is on point. They're some of the best in terms of the work they deliver, but they still run on paper, which is absolutely ludicrous because it's inefficient and it wastes time and money. And I know that nobody would want to do that if they're running a business, but I don't think that AI is a boogeyman. I think it's one more tool that is exponentially more powerful than most new tools that have been introduced to just people in general, but that it is a fantastic tool. And if you learn how to use it, and you should, that it's really just an efficiency tool at the end of the day. I like, as a creative person, I like it for ideating. And here's something else that people don't really talk about, but if you were to talk to one, you would know this, and you probably have met lots of them. CEOs, they usually describe themselves as visionaries. Whether they use that phrase or not, they usually do. So why on earth would you view yourself different in terms of the value of creating or purpose-driven work? It is a fantastic tool if you want to ideate and then produce, realize, materialize your purpose-driven work just to get started. The hardest thing for people to do is to get started, and I think AI is a fantastic tool because it gets you started like this. I had an idea for something earlier today, and I said, I want to distill this information into an action plan for my client. I spent 5 minutes on what used to take somebody hours, weeks, and months to do. Because, as you know, instructional design, that is a very detailed, lengthy process. It takes research. I did it like that. And now I can get to the result for my client, or I can get the result for myself. And here's the other thing too. You have talked about doing purpose-driven work. I will tell you that every job seeker I speak to, I don't care where they're at in their career, the level that they're at, the success they've had. Again, everyone is reevaluating what it means for them to do something with their career or what success looks like. You're teaching it to students early and often, but there are people right now in the workforce who've been in it for 30 plus years, and they're all asking the same question that you are posing to your students, which is, why are you doing this? Why does it mean something to you? Why is it important that you do this? And here's the upside. Using tools like AI, you can actually create a lot of value for yourself and even financial success from it. There's a woman on TikTok. I don't need to name her. She's famous enough. She has no education whatsoever. She taught herself prompt engineering, and she makes millions of dollars a month. And she doesn't have to do much of anything except for show up on TikTok and just talk about what she does and sell you a course. She doesn't even have a staff. Her staff, because I tried to pitch something to her, and she's like, "Do you know who I am?" She's like, "No, it's fine." She's not a rude person, but what she meant to say was, her business is run by ChatGPT. And when I say run by ChatGPT, I mean she has custom GPTs built out. If you don't know what those are, you need to look them up and start to use them. And by the way, it's cost effective to do so. I don't work for OpenAI or anything, but to help people be productive. She has her entire executive team built out in ChatGPT. If you learn how to do this, you can teach ChatGPT about your business and you can begin to build out business plans, and it will almost run automatically and you can just check in with it. It's sophisticated. You have to do this. I'm not saying you're going to go do it today just because you heard me say it.
No, we are doing it already. We have
So you know what I'm talking about.
entrepreneurship faculty that are doing that. The whole idea where the students write a 20 pages business plan from scratch, and they don't do customer delivery or get out of the building till a month has passed. That's long ago. Especially entrepreneurship courses we're building.
And here's the interesting thing that I think that you will kind of like go, oh, and or you maybe already you're experiencing it. AI is changing so fast that even the guy that I work with, he can't automate certain things because he has to show up and continually educate people because it's changing so fast. So there are some things that I equate to the humanity that can't be, that I've seen. It could change even this year. Who knows? It's changing fast. But there's some things that I've observed that people using AI can't automate because they're too attached to the human experience. So I have this other philosophy, and maybe you share this. I think that AI only creates more value for human connection. It doesn't detract it, because you can use it for any number of things. What you can't use it to do is for you and I to have a relationship and a rapport. Could I send you emails and messages? Yes. But unless you have face-to-face time to me, or I have this one-to-one time with you in some way, shape, or form, or I impact you in a way that's not, and I have an AI agent. Like hypothetically, I could do that. But the value of our relationship is from our humanity. It's not an AI.
But David, not to challenge you on that one, but
please challenge me. I'm open to being
wrong. What if this is not Maria? Because you told me, can you meet me for an hour? And I was busy in another meeting, so I just sent my avatar to talk to you right now. Who is telling you that you are talking to the real Maria and not my AI generated avatar?
You could do that. You could even imitate the fact that you said, oh, I'm kind of nervous, or, how do I present, all those things.
A well-trained avatar will be able to do that. It's funny, I went to the Sphere in Las Vegas a few years ago when they first opened, and they have all these robots, right, that are able to engage in a conversation. And the robot was able to pick up my accent. So it made fun of my accent. And then it was asking me, why are you wearing sunglasses indoors? So the level, and this is 2 years ago already, or 2 years and a half, whenever they opened the Sphere.
Wow.
The level of interaction with avatars and the humanization of those avatars, and the level, again, of similarities to a real human being, I think is going to create some ethical friction in the future. I'm glad that you think that the human factor will always be needed, but I'm questioning at some point, again, AI will be so advanced and robotic will be so advanced that will make us create, conversations like these that are actually happen between two AI-driven robots or avatars.
You are correct. I've even created a podcast with two people talking about my work that don't exist. So it is possible.
Yeah. Have you tried Notebook? I mean, it is scary. I do a lot of case writing. You go to Harvard Publishing, you see my cases. I uploaded a case, 15 pages. In 2 minutes, I have this podcast between two wonderful voices that went, I will not say they went super deep in the analysis, but they were able to give you a really good overview of what were the tensions in the case, who was the protagonist, the social issue, what were the dynamics on the organization, and it was generated in 2 minutes. Not only that, now I can ask questions. Yeah, it is, yes. So that's why
I've done it.
To your point about the human factor, is like, just give them a couple of years. That's why we need to meet in 2025, no matter where we are in the world.
You could do it today. You could, there's software you could do it with today. You could use 11 Labs. You can use any of these avatars and produce it. I still think you can spot them You know what's funny? And I do think it's funny. When I have reached out to people for marketing or partnerships on LinkedIn, I get this question. And I also get it when I make phone calls. Are you AI? And do you want to know when they ask this question? If I am being polite and if I'm articulating my words, they will stop and they will say, I'm sorry, is this AI? And then I'll
You're
laugh.
too perfect. You're too perfect.
I will, well, that's the thing. It's people are now mistaking manners and just having a decorum as being AI because the perception is that it's too perfect, or probably a better way to put it would be maybe it's too formal, and they go, well, this is not how people call and talk to me, or I'm not sure how deep the perception goes, but I've gotten that more than once, and so I just bust up laughing and then I'll say something totally off color so they know that there's no way that it's AI. But it could also be programmed to do it. So fair enough. But again, I still think that it would bring you back to, okay, well, then maybe the meetings we have in the future, they have to be in person. I have to be able to walk and talk with you or stand in the room. Again, I think those things only become more valuable. But I know that right now you and I could use Notebook. I was using Notebook LM before I hopped on here. And that's not even the most advanced tool, but you can do what you said. I've done it
Yeah.
and just come up with a whole podcast like, oh, great. I didn't feel like showing up on camera today, but I have all of the data. I have the report here. Let me just but again, back to the other point, this allows you to take action quicker from ideation to action to output. That's why I think it's a valuable tool. At the end of the day, if you're looking at your job or if you're looking at how you deliver something to clients, the faster you can get it to them, the more efficient, the more time you have for maybe it's the purpose for the rest of your day. Maybe it's more ideas, maybe it's more revenue, whatever it is that you are defining as your priorities. I just think that it creates more time for that. I don't think that it devalues people. I think where it devalues people is the perception and how people are treated. I have heard of people recently that I've spoken to personally say that they were let go because of technology catching up, essentially AI. But that being said, I think
Yeah.
it's important to develop these skills like your students are learning so that they don't become irrelevant. And what I can say that I hear often is that if you don't learn these new skills, much like anything else, you can't be the person that says, well, I don't know how to use email. I don't know how to Google something online. Okay, well, then you probably don't need to be working here because you're going to have a real hard time. We're not a paper-driven business. It's going to be the same thing. How quickly can
Yeah.
you optimize this business process? And I do believe that the lower level skills are going to go away. Like, I don't think entry level jobs, as we talk about them today, are going to exist in 2 years.
No, I agree with that. And that's going back to my responsibility as an educator and thinking in AI, right? And I define that trifecta: prompting engineering, critical thinking, and ethical consideration. Is the critical thinking piece that I'm still trying to figure out, because you use AI and when you get the output, you have the understanding because of your expertise to see, okay, this is good enough, I can improve this, I can ask this question a little bit different, and then you decide what you present, right, as the final output. But a student, and I don't blame them, they don't know, and AI give them a false perception of been doing a good work. When you start scratching the analysis, is like, okay, this is vague, this is repetitive, this is actually a hallucination. So that's why my biggest challenge now is in the critical thinking aspect of using AI for the students, so they don't just cut and paste the output and present that as something that is actually even reasonable, because it's not. I will hate for them to be on their first job and say, yeah, I know how to use AI, and actually say, this is what AI can do for me, and that thing is actually
You bring up a
not.
good point. I've heard that younger students or just younger people, some of them are actually refusing to use AI because they want to develop the critical thinking skill set by doing the long form version of the work. But I also believe that first of all, you can't avoid the technology. It's not happening. I mean, go live in the trees if you want to, but it's not happening.
No.
I do believe, though, and this is a practice in technology, I do believe that it's important to take a quality control approach and to A/B test things. I'm using this rhetoric for a reason, but it's important to do that because that is part of the critical thinking process. One, I can get into ideation and action and production or delivery of it, but you still need to test it. And sometimes the testing it piece comes from putting it into practice. And sometimes it might be you need to learn the hard way that you didn't think critically or you didn't QC that work and have the outcome. That outcome could be severe, or it could be your boss saying, you didn't read this, did you? Or this is not what I asked for. And that comes into communications, expectations, and all those other challenges that are more soft skills and experience driven. But that being said, I think that taking that QC approach, A/B testing those things, are still opportunities to do critical thinking. I don't think it takes away from the opportunity to do that. You have to have the intention behind the production of your work, regardless of the tool that you use, to get the outcome that you were asked for, that is expected. And that still requires communication and critical thinking.
Yeah. And understanding AI should not be thought as a shortcut, right, to a work well done, more like an assistant. It's going to enhance the skills that I am trying to develop, but versus no, it's helping me to do a shortcut and do it.
Yeah, I think it'll be an evolving process as it continues to develop almost on a weekly basis. I would love to conclude with something a little more inspiring, because we've talked about mentorship a lot. I talk about it in this podcast a lot because it's invaluable, and I'm sure that's part of your purpose-driven work, is to provide that invaluable asset of mentorship to others who you educate. What would you say at this stage in your career or this stage in your life is the most valuable lesson that you've learned through mentoring? Since you talked about mentorship being an education opportunity for yourself, what would you say is one of the most valuable lessons that you've learned as a mentor? Something that was taught to you through that experience.
It's a hard question, but I never saw myself as a mentor, to be honest, and I'm not trying to be humble here, till I have students that came back a few years later and they told me what was the impact of the conversations we have early on. So that's what I'm saying, is a 360. My mentees have shaped me as a mentor because of then communicating later. For all the people that have had a mentor, if you have never called back that person or be in touch with your teacher or your coworker or your previous boss, call them back, send them an email and say, I want you to know how impactful was, those early conversations we have on your time. Because I do believe in this idea that we are all, or I am, a work in progress. I think I will keep learning till the day I die. So that perception that I now have that of being a mentor has been shaped by my own mentees. And I want to thank them for that. And that's what I want to encourage other people to reach out and talk to the people that they consider the mentors. Because I never thought I could have anything of value for other people, and that my own experience, again, as a female in a male-dominated industry, was going to be so influential in especially female Latinx first-generation students. So all I'm trying to say, call your mentor and say thank you, because you will be helping them to, become better mentors in the future.
One of my guests presented the idea that most people don't know they're a mentor until someone else calls them a mentor.
Yeah, that's exactly my point, and that's what I think is important. Where we recognize and we think of who have been the mentors in our life, and that could be someone as close as our own parents, right, or older siblings. I mean, we tend to think professionally, but it could be a professor even in a K through 12 course, someone in middle school that believe in you, or in higher school that say the right words at the right time, and that shape some of the decisions that you make. So call your mentor.
Yeah, again, talk to people. It could change your life. Some people forget. I mean, like I said, one of my first guests, somebody I went to college with, he was one of the first people I met, and I hadn't talked to him until 20 years later. And then I said, hey,
Wow.
Let's have a conversation here. So you never know. And it's kind of funny. You never know who also is on your mind, because you left this legacy of impact that gave them purpose. And all you have to do is just talk to them, or, as you said, give them a call.
Absolutely.
Maria, it was fantastic to speak with you again. I know I'll be seeing you around, but thank you so much for contributing your thoughts around mentorship and education. Even our predictions for where it might go in the next 5 years.
Well, I hope to see you in 5 years, and thank you for creating this shared space for reflection. Much needed.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you.